As a reminder, in our last lesson, we introduced the IUPAC system of nomenclature, which follows a set of rules to arrive at a molecular name predictably. Most of the rules we've used already, but in this chapter we'll deal with some of the molecules that need a different suffix and some molecules that need a special descriptor. Alkanes, alkenes, and alkynes are all functional groups that refer to the bonding between carbons and carbons. Alkanes are only named as alkanes if there is no more important functional group. Anytime there is an alkene in a molecule, a carbon double bonded to a carbon, the ane part of the name will be replaced with ene. Anytime there is an alkyne in the molecule, the ane gets replaced with ine. Notice that propyne here is still 3 carbons, but it is always drawn linear because it is linear. Because alkenes and alkynes now have an interesting bond somewhere along the chain, we need a number to indicate where. Otherwise, these clearly different pentenes would be indistinguishable, and these butynes would be similarly indistinguishable. The first molecule is a 2-pentene. Notice that we only use the lower of the 2 numbers that the alkene will cover. It is a 2-pentene, not a 2,3-pentene. We can also put the 2 directly in front of the ene part of the molecule. This is equally correct. Now pause and try to identify the numbers for the other molecules. The second pentene is a 1-pentene. We can also say it as a pent-1ene. There's also a 2-butyne, and the other butyne is a 1-butyne. Remember, we always give the lowest possible number for any of our functional groups. Remember from the last section that in a ring, the first position is automatically wherever a substituent is if there is only one, and it is not labeled. If there are multiple substituents of different priority, the first position will be assigned by the most important, the highest priority group. If there are side chains on a molecule, the number for the position of an alkene or alkyne will come either directly before the main chain name or directly before the ene or ine. But the side chain will be written on the other side before the number for the ene or ine. Whenever we are trying to identify the main chain in a molecule with a functional group that makes its way into the main chain name, like alkenes and alkynes, the main chain must include that functional group, even when it is shorter that way. While alkenes and alkynes, both carbons need to be part of the main chain. If an alkene, for whatever reason, cannot be named as part of the main chain, we can name the alkene as a side chain. For a single carbon connected through an alkene, we can name it with a common side chain name, methylene. The IUPAC name for alkenes as side chains takes the length root, in this case meth, followed by ene for the alkene, and ending with YL because it is a side chain. So methenol would also work here and more generally as well. Just like when there are multiple methyls, we use di, tri, etc. to indicate multiple double or triple bonds. We add an A between the root and the prefix di, tri, etc. so it's easier to pronounce. So you see propadiene instead of propdiene. We can also move the prefix to before the main chain stem, so we could say dipropene or trihexyne. In the case of mixed alkenes and alkynes, molecules that have both of those functional groups, we need a suffix for each. Ene will always come first, but the final E is dropped, so it's just En instead of Ene. Ines come second and are the same as always. The locators for alkenes can go before the molecule or before the En, but the locators for the alkyne must go directly before the Yne, ine suffix, for clarity. Numbers are given as low as possible, but in a tie, alkenes are numbered lower. There are some alkenes that have common names that are used ubiquitously. The 4 names given should be memorized. There are also alkene side chains that have common names. No vinyl and allyl, since they come up a lot. Don't worry about propargyl. A six-membered ring with alternating double and single bonds looks like a triene, but it behaves very differently. Remember that we gave the functional group that separate category aromatic. This compound is called benzene, and derivatives are named as benzene modified by its side chains in most cases. When we have two substituents on a benzene, we can use absolute positioning with numbers. However, relative positioning is really important for benzene's reactivity, so there are also special names for the relative positioning of two groups. These only work on benzene and only when it's disubstituted. The special name for 1,2 positioning is ortho and is indicated by an O. 1,3 is indicated with an M for meta, and 1,4 is indicated by a P for para. Occasionally, you'll hear ipso, which refers to 1,1 positioning, but this only happens in the middle of a reaction as part of its mechanism. When we have more than two substituents, we need to use numbers. We cannot use ortho or meta or para. As always, we keep the numbers as low as possible. We break ties by alphabetical order of substituents, and we use prefixes to indicate multiples of the same substituent, like di, tri, and tetra. Some benzene derivatives have common names. Toluene is methylbenzene. Methoxybenzene is also known as anisole, and vinylbenzene is also known as styrene. Dimethylbenzene is xylene, but the methyls could be arranged into ortho, meta, or para. They would all be known as xylene still. We always indicate whether it's ortho, meta, or para for the molecule xylene. When we are numbering a benzene with a common name, like these, the substituent indicated by the name is automatically number 1. For example, the methyl of toluene is 1, so the molecule shown here is 2,4,6-trinitrotoluene, TNT. Benzenes can be side chains too. Sometimes we will just shorthand the formula C6H5, which would be a benzene coming off of something else. Obviously, one hydrogen has to be missing to be coming off something else. But more commonly, we write PH to indicate phenyl, which is the common name for this side chain. If a carbon separates benzene from a main chain, we give the side chain the name benzyl, sometimes indicated by BN. These are very common, and you should absolutely know these.